New report, California state officials failed to monitor the embers days before the devastating Palisades fire. Why is this so important? Well, I think the state of California's response to the California wildfires that happened just about a year ago, it's going to be one of those major things in the 2028 presidential election. And this is one of those pieces of the puzzle. Let's get into it. Here we go. Documents in a lawsuit filed by 3,000 residents of the Palisades indicate a California state representative was on the scene a week before the deadly Palisades fire. And they didn't really do much in the way of follow-up. And then, boom, Palisades fire happened. Let's watch this video. Here we go.
Tonight, we have new exclusive details on the investigation into the handling of the deadly Palisades fire in California. News Nation investigative correspondent 𝗪𝗥𝗧𝗛𝗏 obtained documents that may show that the state is, in fact, solely responsible for that fire and possibly for the deaths of the 12 people who died. Last week, our exclusive reporting found that a state representative was present near the burn scar, which had all the embers deep underground of a fire that had not been completely turned out. Well, it eventually turned into the Palisades fire. And apparently, according to our reporting, a state representative was on the scene ordering firefighters around, telling them where they could and could not go. Well, tonight, we not only have confirmation that a state representative was there, but we now know exactly when they arrived and why. News Nation's 𝗪𝗥𝗧𝗏 joins us now with this exclusive. Rich, tell us what more you've managed to uncover.
Hi, Elizabeth. Well, it's really shocking, and ultimately it comes down to two really big questions. Number one, did state mismanagement ultimately cause the Palisades fire? And did they lie about it in court? Lie about it in court? And these new documents that we've obtained suggest that that's absolutely what happened. Now, this all began in the early morning hours of January 1 when an alleged...
That's not going to look good for Gavin Newsom. He's already got so many things going against him. Number one, they basically tried to state, oh, it was set on fire by an arsonist. That's not our problem. Yeah, but when you knew something was going on, you sent a state official out there and then you lied about it. That's called the response to the fire. And then you have the whole, there's no water in the fire hydrants. There's no water in the reservoir. Just, Karen Bass is in where she was, not in the country. The whole thing is just Ghana. Wasn't she in Ghana?
Started the 𝗨𝗏𝗧𝗏 fire, and we know underground embers reignited 6 days later, starting a second, more devastating fire. That was the Palisades fire. In response to a lawsuit from over 3,000 Palisades residents alleging the state failed to monitor embers from that initial fire, Governor Newsom's office told News Nation, the state didn't start this fire. That was an arsonist, and the state wasn't responsible for responding to or monitoring this fire.
Then who is? Like, local city officials? State's not going to take any responsibility? I'm sorry. This looks terrible. The optics on this are horrific. But this is California, and that's what everybody is saying is leadership in California is just absolutely dropping the ball on this one.
Now, in new court filings, the state goes further and says the Palisades victims cannot allege that the state had notice of the 𝗨𝗏𝗧𝗏 fire because it never had notice. State records show a call at 12:27 a.m. on January 1, but with the rest of the incident report redacted, completely blacked out, basically, including their response to that call. But a Los Angeles Fire Department record tells...
Look at that. Here's the report. We're going to release the report to you. Not a lot you can see in there, is there? No, there's nothing. It's all redacted, except for just a couple of titles. I mean, somebody's hiding something, right?
All the details.
And the LAFD's records show not only did the LAFD notify the state just after midnight, the state sent a park representative at 1:46 in the morning on January 1, and that state park representative arrived on scene at 4 a.m. on January 1.
Now, that Los Angeles Fire Department incident report shows what the state will not, that the Los Angeles Fire Department contacted the state after midnight on January 1, and a state park rep arrived on scene by 4 a.m.
If the state had no responsibility for this land, why are they sending a state park rep? Because the state is playing hide the ball. They're not being transparent with the public. Tell us that you sent a state park rep. Tell us what that state park rep did. Tell us on the next day, January 2, that you sent another state park rep who directed firefighters and said they couldn't bulldoze.
All of these specific questions, Elizabeth, we have asked to Governor Newsom's office and the California State Parks, and they've declined to answer all of them. Back to you.
All right. We will continue reporting. Rich McHugh, thanks so much.
Last night I was watching a pretty good interview. I forget who some guy who does investigative YouTube work, and it was a really good interview of Palisades fire victim Mel Gibson, the road warrior, Mad Max. And he was saying, he was basically stating that the California leadership has just basically failed their constituents 10 ways from Sunday. And one of the big things was their response to this fire. But in his industry, Hollywood, he gave an example of how expensive it is in California and how much just bureaucracy and layer upon layer upon layer of absolute nonsense there is in getting a movie going, is that he was doing what he called a reshoot. And he said, well, we're just going to do it. We're going to do it in Hollywood. Let's get it done in Hollywood. And they got their quotes. And at the end of the day, they ended up taking their entire crew, flew their entire crew to Bulgaria to shoot there, put them all up, feed them, fly them back, and it was still way cheaper and way more efficient to do that, to fly, halfway around the world and shoot a scene, whatever it was that he needed, than to stay in Hollywood in California and shoot it there, because everything is so cost prohibitive and everybody's shooting movies now. Nobody's shooting movies in Hollywood. They're shooting in Georgia. They're shooting in Atlanta. They're shooting in Vancouver, BC. They're shooting a little bit here in Seattle. They're shooting in Texas. They're shooting in all these locations that have better tax incentives, and they don't have just the absolute cluster of the governmental regulations of what it takes to shoot 1 day's worth of scenes. So he gave that as a pretty good example. And then he also said, hey, the response to the fire is just absolutely, it's crazy not to have water in the reservoir, right? It's crazy, their forest management. They don't do any. They just, let's just let all the timber build up and, and things burn, they burn, burn, baby, burn. Crazy stuff. A lawsuit filed by over 3,000 Pacific Palisades residents has alleged the state of California failed to properly monitor the embers from a smoking fire by an arsonist roughly 6 days before it grew into the most destructive wildfire in LA history. Now, is state of California going to get stuck with this? Probably not. They're going to dodge it and they're going to say, oh, we're doing this. Oh, we're doing this. This is gruesome Newsom, podcaster Newsom. This podcaster Newsom, has he put out any more podcasts? Haven't heard. Maybe he's back to governor/wannabe presidential candidate Newsom, right? Not putting out the podcast. So documents obtained by News Nation, according to the documents, began in the early morning hours of January 1st. We saw that when, state representative is contacted and then he shows up. And then the state goes, oh, yeah, this isn't our problem. Not our problem. They don't want the liability. They don't want the responsibility. Hey, you knew there was a fire happening. You sent a guy out, and then you didn't do anything further beyond that. You got a little bit of liability here, because that turned into the Palisades fire. That was, I believe that was the Eaton fire, right? And then that was set by the arsonist. And so one led to the other. The embers went to the other one, and state officials should have known. State officials dropped the ball like they've done on everything consistently. Just drop the ball, drop the ball, drop the ball. I mean, when you talk about all the things that California has going against it, leadership is some of the greatest mistakes, some of the greatest problems that they've got. Have you seen there's like billboards going up in Los Angeles? California #1 in homelessness, California #1 in poverty, just starting to break out. And I've talked about that consistently here. Hey, the 2028 presidential election, when you've got Newsom running, which he will, and all the Republicans need to do is just basically say all the things that California is #1 at that you don't want to be #1 at. Just the #1 of the highest gas prices, highest food costs, highest homelessness, highest poverty. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on. Home prices, insurance costs, you name it. Policy has made California basically unlivable, to the point where Hollywood shuts down and says, we're going to go to Bulgaria to shoot our film. You're like, where is that on the map and why are we going there? Can you imagine going for 3 days? I mean, by that third day, your jet lag is just starting to come off, right? And then, we're getting on the plane, we're going back. And that's way cheaper. Taking a whole film crew, I think he said like 100 people. Just this massive amount to shoot one scene. But that's how ridiculous California has become. Just an absolute cluster of, progressive bureaucratic nonsense that doesn't need to be, that's designed to protect the people or protect somebody. It certainly isn't the people, but that's what they always say, right? So the Los Angeles Fire Department records is what we heard. Not only did the Los Angeles Fire Department notify the state just after midnight, the state sent a park representative at 1:46 in the morning on January 1st, and the state park representative arrived sometime about 4 a.m., and he's there. He's there. If the state had no responsibility for this land, why are they sending a state park rep? Yeah, that's the question I have as well. They're playing hiding the ball. Yeah. Areas of a park unit which have burned will remain closed until appropriate department staff have inspected the area and rectified any public safety property or resource protection issues. Okay. All right. So yeah, there is liability. Absolutely. I mean, this isn't that hard to figure out, right? But Newsom state officials, they'll dodge it. They'll say, oh, there's a miscommunication over here. We had a lack of authorization. This individual wasn't supposed to be there because at the end of the day, it was an arsonist and we are the state and we have zero responsibility for anything. Yeah. Crazy, right? People were able to hike up through there while the embers in the hillside remained active. We have reports of a state park representative coming up to the area of 𝗥𝗘𝗠𝗜𝗨𝗠 with a map and directing firefighters which way they could touch and not touch. Oh, in what they could touch and not touch, what they could bulldoze and not bulldoze. We know that occurred on January 2nd. After the fire was identified. Hey, got our state representative here for the whole fire. Absolutely nuts, right? So we've already seen this statement. The state didn't start this fire. I was an arsonist. Okay. Yeah. But then you've got responsibility to follow up on that and make sure that other things don't burn up, right? Oh, no. Yeah, we're not doing that. And the state wasn't responsible for responding to or monitoring the fire. Again, well, then who is? LA Fire Department? Okay, but you got some guy there telling everybody, can't bulldoze that. Nope, can't touch that. In new court filings, the state went further, saying the Palisades victims cannot allege that the state had notice of the 𝗥𝗘𝗠𝗏 fire because they themselves never had notice. But you got a fire official there. So which one is it? Because you got to pick one. You can't go with no and yes. You got to pick one. This is where the sleazy politicians will go ahead and rework some statement and say some nonsense. I mean, the whole thing is, it just leaves you going, yeah, we're completely lacking transparency here. That's what we have going on. We have the worst fire in the state's history as far as number of buildings burned, 12 people dead. I mean, in the Palisades fire, just massive destruction. And that handling, I think specifically, there's huge liability there. There's huge liability there. Will they try and sweep it under the rug? Well, that's what they're doing right now, right? That's exactly what they're doing. So that's that scenario. So where do we sit? All right. So we say that, California officials, they totally dropped the ball in the whole fire thing. So where are we 10 months after the Palisades fire? By October 29th, 2025, a few weeks ago, the city of LA reported nearly 300 homes are confirmed to have started construction across the Pacific Palisades out of 6,500 total. So you got 300 homes have started construction. More than close to 2,000 planned checkup applications have been received for over 990 addresses, and over 1,000 rebuilding plans have been approved. So we're rapidly coming up on a year here. And out of just the 6,000 homes in the Palisades, you've got 300 or started construct. How long is this going to take total? And how many people are just going to completely bail and say, boop, done, I'm out? And how many of those people will vote for Gavin Newsom? I mean, this is going to have an impact one way or the other. That's going to have a huge impact. Because this is something very current and ongoing and just an absolute cluster. And we knew that this would be a massive cluster because it happened in California. California has some of the strictest regulations. You got to work with the coastal, whatever it is, ecological coastal commission. I mean, just a whole bunch of, environmental nonsense that doesn't need to be there, but because Californians need to virtue signal and they've been led down this road by officials, oh yeah, we're the greenest of all. No, you're not. You just pay the most in life costs of everything because you virtue signal. You're not really having an impact on the environment. In fact, you're having oftentimes an opposite impact on the environment. Look at the whole plastic bags deal. More plastic is consumed now after the whole plastic bags ban. Plastic straw, same thing. Just absolutely absurd and ridiculous. Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass issued an executive order to streamline the process. Well, you know how that's going to go. You can't streamline this process, and you can't make this affordable. You can't do anything to move this along because all the processes in California are already so buggered up with just delays and the way this whole thing is designed. I mean, this is going to be a decade before this is all finished. We're still going to be talking about this in like 2035. Well, we're finally wrapping up construction efforts in the Palisades after a very difficult and long period of drawn out. How soon until somebody just starts suing left and right because they're just pissed, right? I am upset. My house burned down. There's no water in the reservoir. There's no water in the fire hydrants. State didn't do its job. And then they lied about how they had a representative out here and then they didn't. And they have no responsibility because it was an arsonist. And you're just left with what is going on? And Karen Bass was in Ghana. Mayor Bass was in Ghana when this happened. She was struggling to get back. After she told everybody she wasn't going to do any more international trips. What in the F are you doing in Ghana? I mean, that is some real nonsense, right? So since then, the city has attempted to improve the situation. On October 30th, Santa Monica Daily Press reported that Malibu accelerated fire rebuild efforts and issued 354 permits for repairs and debris removal. Additionally, the city launched a fee waiver program. established a one-step rebuilding portal, created a zone captain program, and added dedicated case managers. Well, that partridge in a pear tree and moving this situation to Texas, you'll get it finished quickly, right? Yeah, you got to move it to another state that knows how to get things built, that knows how to get things done. And it ain't California. And leadership in California is 100% to blame for all of this just immense foul up that doesn't allow things to move efficiently. You can just see it in everything, right? City infrastructure. Beyond individual homes, larger efforts are needed to rebuild the city's infrastructure and support ongoing reconstruction throughout the area. Park detailed that the Department of Water and Power is preparing plans to repair and modernize the electrical system and is committed to putting utilities underground when possible. So you've got infrastructure that at the same time needs to be built out as well, because, you had a massive fire, and I'm sure some of that stuff got damaged and some of it was old. This is not a new area. This is not a new development. So you don't have utilities that are current. So you're doing just, a whole bunch of that stuff. How about the whole insurance cluster F that is California, that is Los Angeles? About 1,600 insurance policies in the Pacific Palisades were dropped by State Farm in July of 2024, right before this happened, right? I'd like to be one of those people. I mean, just the lawsuits, just boop, 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 just happening nonstop. I don't think there was much left in the rest of this. Rebuilding. Yeah, good luck rebuilding, folks.
Happening today, the man accused of starting the fire that eventually grew into the Palisades fire is expected in court today. 29-year-old Jonathan Ridderneck remains in custody, and he is expected to argue for a pretrial release at this hearing. He has already pleaded not guilty to 3 felony charges related to the fire.
Yeah, let's let him go. That seems reasonable, right? Meanwhile, as all this stuff is going on, Gavin Newsom is in Brazil, where California imports over half of their gasoline from, as they cut down the rainforest to get the gas for California, because it's pushed all the refineries out, and it's got its own special blend of herbs and spices that go into its blend. And California doesn't have enough gas. Gavin Newsom pushes climate agenda in Brazil, downplays affordability concerns because he's got the most expensive gas because of ridiculous environmental nonsense that doesn't need to be there. And I know this personally because I watch the price of gas here in Washington State. Yep, we've got progressive Democrats to thank for what was supposed to be just pennies on the dollar. Taxation on cap and trade carbon emissions has resulted in basically second highest gas prices in the United States, typically behind California. California Governor Gavin Newsom is in the midst of touting his state's leadership on energy policies while in Brazil for a United Nations climate conference that nobody cares about. Nobody gives a crap about. This is just utter grandstanding and just, look at me go, vote for me in 2028. Well, Golden State residents pay the highest gas prices in the U.S., which were largely attributable to state regulations. This is self-imposed destruction from the standpoint of policy. You have ruined your own state with terrible policy, and now you want to make the rest of America do the same thing by becoming president and dictating your absolute nonsense. I think the climate craze is over as far as this massive push for the United States to be on board with all this absolute nonsense. I think people are actually kind of recognizing, you know what? Yeah, maybe there is, some impact from, all this environmental concern that it doesn't really seem really doing much for the environment. But politicians keep telling us, you got to do that because you've got issues like this one right here. Newsom's gas price crusade morphs into bid to keep refiners open. I mean, you can't make this stuff up, right? You can't make it up. Here's something I found super interesting. So you've got a recent report out from one of the economists for California, and it basically stated it also acknowledges that certain refiners, however, may only be marginally profitable outside of price spikes. This is partly because refiners' operating expenses in California and the West Coast, while generally stable since 2024, are higher than in the rest of the U.S., in part because of higher labor and energy costs. So everything else that California's leadership has screwed up ends up in the cost of gasoline as well. In other words, the surcharge could just reflect doing business in California is more expensive than in other states. Kind of like Mel Gibson just came right out and said, hey, I blame leadership because they're doing a terrible job. And trying to get back to a place of affordability, trying to get gasoline prices in California to where they are in Texas, to where they are in other states, ain't happening because it's all built in. It's systemic, right? It's systemic to how California does business. And I think the rest of the country will look in and go, at least the smart ones will, right? At least just over half of the smart United States citizens. This is validation that Californians have been getting hosed at the pump for decades because too few refiners make too much of our gasoline. Having only a few refiners has contributed to the price picture, as does the state's unique smog-fighting gasoline formula and the lack of pipelines to import fuel from other states. In fact, after Newsom's legislation passed, 2 refiners announced plans to shut down, leading to speculation that gas prices could hike due to record levels due to shrinking supplies. One might have expected that Newsom would jump upon the report as validation of his price gouging accusations, but the report didn't make that conclusion, and the governor has since changed his tune and is trying to stave off refinery closures. Oh, we're coming back to, good Lord. So you've got gas prices. You've got the response to, Palisades and Eaton fires. And you've just got so many things that are kind of racking up against Newsom, against California's leadership, and yet, when push comes to shove and he's on the ballot, president 2028, are Democrats still going to go, he's our guy? He led us terribly, but he's our guy. Yeah, probably. We'll cover that as well. Make sure you're subscribed, hit that notification bell, send to friends and family if you enjoy this content, and I'll see you on the next one. Thanks again for joining. We'll catch up soon. Bye for now.